Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in my series reading Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. Without further ado, returning to Oliver Twist as read by Lord Naren White. These new friends then, said Mr. Brownlow, were a naval officer retired from active service, whose wife had died some half a year before, and left him 2 children. There had been more, but of all their family happily but 2 survived. They were both daughters, one a beautiful creature of 19, and the other a mere child of 2 or 3 years old. "What's this to me?" asked Monks. "They resided," said Mr. Brownlow, without seeming to hear the interruption, "in a part of the country to which your father in his wandering had repaired, and where he had taken up his abode. Acquaintance, intimacy, friendship, fast followed on each other. Your father was gifted as few men are. He had his sister's soul and person. As the old officer knew him more and more, he grew to love him. I would that it had ended there. His daughter did the same." The old gentleman paused. Monks was biting his lips, with his eyes fixed upon the floor. Seeing this, he immediately resumed. "The end of a year found him contracted, solemnly contracted, to that daughter, the object of the first true, ardent, only passion of a guileless girl." "Your tale is of the longest," observed Monks, moving restlessly in his chair. "It is a true tale of grief and trial, and sorrow, young man," returned Mr. Brownlow, "and such tales usually are. If it were one of unmixed joy and happiness, it would be very brief. At length one of those rich relations to strengthen whose interest and importance your father had been sacrificed, as others are often, it is no uncommon case, died to repair the misery he had been instrumental in occasioning. Left him his panacea for all griefs, money. It was necessary that he should immediately repair to Rome, whither this man had sped for health, and where he had died, leaving his affairs in great confusion. He went, was seized with mortal illness there, was followed, the moment the intelligence reached Paris, by your mother, who carried you with her. He died the day after her arrival, leaving no will, so that the whole property fell to her and you." At this part of the recital Monks held his breath, and listened with a face of intense eagerness, though his eyes were not directed towards the speaker. As Mr. Brownlow paused, he changed his position with the air of one who has experienced a sudden relief, and wiped his hot face and hands. "Before he went abroad, and as he passed through London on his way," said Mr. Brownlow, slowly, and fixing his eyes upon the other's face, "he came to me—" "I never heard of that," interrupted Monks, in a tone intended to appear incredulous, but savouring more of disagreeable surprise. "He came to me, and left with me, among some other things, a portrait painted by himself, a likeness of this poor girl, which he did not wish to leave behind, and could not carry forward on his hasty journey. He was worn by anxiety and remorse almost to a shadow, talked in a wild and distracted way, of ruin and dishonour, worked by himself, confided to me his intention to convert his whole property, at any loss, into money, and having settled on his wife, and you a portion of his recent acquisition, to fly the country. I guessed too well he would not fly alone, and never see it more. Even from me, his old and early friend, whose strong attachment had taken root in the earth that covered one most dear to both. Even from me he withheld any more particular confession, promising to write and tell me all, and after that to see me once again. For the last time on earth, alas, that was the last time. I had no letter, and I never saw him more. I went," said Mr. Brownlow, after a short pause. "I went, when all was over, to the scene of his— I will use the term the world would freely use, for other worldly harshness or favour are now alike to him— of his guilty love, resolved that if my fears were realized, that erring child should find one heart and home to shelter and compassionate her. The family had left that part a week before. They had called in such trifling debts as were outstanding, discharged them, and left the place by one night. Why or whither, none can tell. Monks drew his breath yet more freely, and looked round with a smile of triumph. When your brother, said Mr. Brownlow, drawing nearer to the other chair, when your brother, a feeble, ragged, neglected child, was vast in my way by a stronger hand than chance, and rescued by me from a life of vice and infamy. What? Cried Monks. By me, said Mr. Brownlow. I told you I should interest you before long. I say by me, I see that your cunning associate suppressed my name, although for aught he knew, it would be quite strange to your ears, when he was rescued by me, then and lay recovering from sickness in my house, even the strong resemblance to this picture I have spoken of struck me with astonishment. Even when I first saw him in all his dirt and misery, there was a lingering expression in his face that came upon me like a glimpse of some old friend flashing on one in a vivid dream. I need not tell you he was snared away before I knew his history. Why not? Asked Monks hastily. Because you know it well. Denial to me is vain, replied Mr. Brownlow. I shall show you that I know more than that. You can't prove anything against me, stammered Monks. I defy you to do it. We shall see, returned the old man with a searching glance. I lost the boy, and no efforts of mine could recover him. Your mother being dead, I knew that you alone could solve the mystery if anybody could, and, as when I had last heard of you, you were on your own estate in the West Indies, whither, as you well know, you retired upon your mother's death to escape the consequences of vicious courses here. I made the voyage. You had left it months before, and were supposed to be in London, but no one could tell where. I returned. Your agents had no clue to your residence. You came and went, they said, as strangely as you had ever done, sometimes for days together, and sometimes for months, keeping to all appearance the same low haunts and mingling with the same infamous herd who had been your associates when a fierce, ungovernable boy. I wearied them with new applications. I paced the streets by night and day. But until 2 hours ago, all my efforts were fruitless, and I never saw you for an instant. And now you see me, said Monks, rising boldly. What then? Fraud and robbery are high-sounding words, justified, you think, by a fancied resemblance in some young imp to an idle daub of a dead man's brother. You don't even know that a child was born of this maudlin pair. You don't even know that. I did not, replied Mr. Brownlow, rising too. But within the last fortnight I have learned it all. You have a brother, you know it, and him. There was a will which your mother destroyed, leaving the secret and the gain to you at her own death. It contained a reference to some child, likely to be the result of this sad connection. Which child was born, and accidentally encountered by you, when your suspicions were first awakened by his resemblance to your father. You repaired to the place of his birth. There existed proofs long suppressed, of his birth and parentage. Those proofs were destroyed by you, and now, in your own words to your accomplished Jew, the only proofs of the boy's identity lie at the bottom of the river, and the old hag that received them from the mother is rotting in her coffin. And we'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.